We now have a session on interoperable digital wallets in practice, the standards, challenges, and learnings from implementations. I will let the moderator, Harmen van der Kooij, take over. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we'll continue on the previous topic, I would say. So I think it's very close to the topic of standards. Good afternoon. For those that don't know me, I'm Harmen van der Kooij. I'm one of the co-founders of FIDES community. And with the FIDES community, we actually have a global community of implementers of credentials and wallet solutions. And one of the main topics in there is actually interoperability. So we as FIDES, we also coordinate a number of interoperability projects, which is a real challenge. Well, in this panel, actually, we're going to talk with a group of people that, on the one hand, are implementers, right? So they can explain themselves exactly what they're doing, but also an organization that's very much more in certification, which of course is becoming a more important topic. So before we start, shall we do a brief intro, one by one, who you are and in general what you're doing in relation to interoperability?
Okay, so thank you. So my name is Mikaël Dubreucq. I'm in charge of digital identity division at GT Group. What we do today in the digital identity space, that I would say GT is working on digital identity for many years ago, starting many years in the US and starting to deploy first MDL solutions on the US market. And today we are moving forward to, I would say, complete digital identity solution and for governments, operating some projects in LATAM today also, and deploying all the components which is needed for government and on the issuance side, on the wallet application side, and the verifier side.
Okay, thanks for that intro. Maybe Rounak is the next one.
Oh, hello, everyone. My name is Rounak. I'm the CEO and co-founder for Ooru Digital. We work with multiple agencies, including GovStack. We're part of the GovStack wallet building block as well as identity building block. We also have a product called CredIssuer, which is a credential issuance platform altogether to issue digital credentials. But we have multiple engines incorporated in CredIssuer, where we can issue different types of credentials through different engines, including NG, Spruce ID, and other MDLM docs or Claim 169 credentials that the new spec that has come out from OSIP.
So you come across a lot of different flavors already.
Yes, we want to do that.
Okay, we'll get back on that.
So I'm Rahul. I'm the co-founder and CTO of TechFi. TechFi, what do we do, right? So we help countries build their foundational ID systems on one side. So you probably heard some of the largest implementations use our ABIS engines for face, finger, and iris. On the other hand, we also have been working on decentralized identification, so contactless fingerprint capture, offline digital ID, and innovations of those sort. And recently, for the last 3 years, what we've been building and deploying and investing in is to, a trust infrastructure company. So which, as you can imagine, plays around. Wallet is an interface. It's not the thing that needs to be deployed. Credentials are the starting point. What we are focused on, building interoperable, not trust frameworks, rails, and then enabling all kinds of stuff that can move on those rails. So yeah, but we focus on Global South, and what we are building is a interoperable ecosystem inside the country. There are some cross-border discussions, but we are focused more on government-sponsored wallets than trying to build just wallets.
Do you think that's a sequence thing, that it will be first in the country and then later on cross-border?
Yeah, I mean, quite obvious. Yeah, as you can imagine, it will become a country, neighboring countries, regionals like ASEAN and ECOWAS and things like those. And then somebody will start talking about cross-border, right? But there will be DTCs and things like those. But we'll come to that, yeah? I don't want to take on.
Exactly, okay. Thanks. Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Pannifer from FIME. We are a provider of testing and certification services in the payments industry and also digital identity. We are global, so we have people located in about 20 countries. We've got labs of different types in 13 countries. We also have a consulting arm called Hyperion that does things like writing specifications, building governance rules around payments and identity. The one thing that we don't do is we don't build any products. So we're independent. So we see ourselves as kind of ecosystem enablers. So we're independent of all solutions.
Okay, thanks. So if we're talking about interoperability, and I think in this forum we're going to talk about the interoperability mainly for credentials, right? Verifiable credentials and the relation with wallets. We already started a bit about it, whether it's cross-border or within the country. Could one of you comment on who's already coming across cross-border interoperability questions? Is that already happening, or is it something we expect to happen in the upcoming years?
Yeah, I'll take a quick, shot at it. So, of course, there are trade unions and trade commissions, African, AFCTA, if you know, they're already discussing cross-border credentials. But then at the same time, you also have to be careful about data sovereignty, right? Countries don't want their credentials to leave their sovereign land. They want the systems to be deployed in country, but at the same time, you want the credentials to travel. It's a very interesting problem to solve, but I would say the real way it's evolving, as I said earlier, is that countries first have to solve their interoperability inside the ecosystem. Then there will be cross-border. People are talking about, if I go to my neighborhood country, can I open a bank account or let people in through free borders? But we haven't yet come across somebody saying, you have an Indonesian national ID, can I verify it in Colombia, right? Or maybe DTCs, but not much more than that. And I don't think it'll happen for the next 5 years, at least for the...
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I agree with Rahul around national IDs. Definitely national IDs are something that we don't see that it needs cross-border verification. But right now in the market, we see that educational credentials are very important. Students from a country generally move to other countries for higher education and stuff, and verifying those documents is very important, and we need to find a way out how, when they move to other country, how do the background checks and verifications happens very smoothly.
And do you expect that in parallel with the, let's say, deployments of those national ID systems, or do you expect it?
We expect at least the universities or the Ministry of Higher Education takes a call at it in the government and at least make a simple portal or something where their credentials can be uploaded and can be verified and trusted.
I think Steve wants to say something.
Yeah. I was going to say there's a lot of work going on at a sort of high governmental level. So whilst we see a trend towards sovereignty in countries wanting to protect their own kind of protect themselves and be self-sufficient, there's also a lot of interest in how you can enable the movement of people, the movement of money, the movement of goods, because even if we are concerned about sovereignty, we still live in a highly connected global world. And so, for example, the EU is sponsoring lots of research in this space. I'm actually doing a piece of research myself on the India-EU corridor. I'm happy to speak to anyone about that outside of the meeting. So I think it is an important topic, because I think we do live in a connected world, and it's going to take some time to sort these things out. But it's an important strategic priority, I think.
And in the previous panel, we were of course talking about standards, right? Mainly technical standards, which are super important. At the same time, we also know that although these standards now become more mature, interoperability still is a challenge, right? What would be the main missing parts of which are important things we would have to add to this whole discussion to get more or easier interoperability? You have a thought on that?
Yeah. That first, when we talk about to be standard compliance, doesn't mean that you are, I would say, operational. You have operational interoperability. That's probably what I would say is very important to understand, that you have multiple variation, okay, in optional field, cryptography, integration, how you are managing the credential lifecycle, are really creating, I would say, interoperability challenges. That's why we're very important that for government to really define, I would say, interoperability profile, to have behind them a strong guidance and also assurance mechanism, helping them to put in this properly. You have also, I would say, today, questions about, I would say, the wallet, multi-wallet integration. You know that many governments want to move to multi-wallet support in the industry. This is a big trend. This is what we see in Europe. And they are pushing that a lot, that because they are thinking that is going to boost, I would say, the adoption, and very letting the user choice in what kind of wallet I want to use. But behind that, even it's going to create innovation, probably also better use cases and experience. We are also seeing interoperability issue, and the fact that the credential portability on wallet to wallet is really a big concern and a big topic in the industry. So depending on where you are in the world, as people say before, and what is happening in the US, where we are working a lot on the US market, where now we really see what I would say the state are deploying on the US and forcing and behind Apple and Google, and the adoption and having only Apple Wallet and Google Wallet to manage your credential versus, I would say, a state application that is going to manage your credential. So all these stuff are really creating interoperability issue today, and need to be really take seriously in the case of deployment and following where you want to deploy digital identity.
Yeah. And Rounak, what I want to ask you is, do you have examples of, I mean, we're now starting this topic of interoperability profiles, right? So what would you describe as really the difference between an interoperability profile and a standard? Because some people say, yeah, that's standards. We have all the standards, which is true, but still it doesn't feel enough to kind of get to interoperability. How would you describe the concept of an interoperability profile, and how important is it for you or not yet?
So right now, we have been working in multiple spaces, including working with UIDI for the latest Aadhaar solution, where they are looking at an interoperable way how people can share their Aadhaar data from instead of just the Aadhaar wallet, through an Apple wallet or a Google wallet or a Samsung wallet. How do they do that, right? They're working there. The issuance is something, they have their own standards, own protocol. It's something that is available in the market, right? They have their own APIs using which Google Wallet as well as Samsung Wallet today have integrated. But sharing of credentials is something, right, where they have got into interoperability. They are using OpenID for VP to share credentials with relying parties. I would call that part of sharing was important for the government of India to make, a bold choice to share data with a relying party using an interoperable, while issuance of the credentials can be dependent on.
Are those detailed specifications already public? So can anybody find out exactly, for instance, how relying parties can use for instance, the Aadhaar credentials? Is that completely?
Yes.
That's great.
Yes. Yeah. So what the UIDI has today done, they have created a new role in the market called OVSC, Offline Verification Seeking Entity. Anybody who wants to seek Aadhaar credentials from offline, from, when I say offline, from the mobile itself or from the wallet itself, rather than going to the Aadhaar database and hitting it. So from the Aadhaar app, you can pull the data and share it. So similarly, you can pull the data from the Google Wallet or the Samsung Wallet today. They're working with Apple right now.
And would it mean, for instance, that a relying party in Ethiopia, would that allow a relying party in another country to use that credential already, or what will be needed?
Okay, so they generally register these entities. Okay, they need some details of the organizations and all that stuff. And while registering, they also accept the keys, the public key of the organization, and register and whitelist them. They do that for free today. So anybody in India at least can become a OVSC. But yes, again, somebody outside India, it's questionable. They are not focused on cross-border right now.
Okay. Hey, and Rahul, you mentioned, for instance, for Ethiopia or some of the other country rollouts that you're working on, that at the moment focus is on national interoperability. Makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, I know that you guys are also very much using the standards in this field. Which standards do you really come across mostly?
So good that you ask. So although we are building sovereign, systems, and I keep going back to saying wallet is the last mile issue. First is the governance, enforcement of the governance, decentralized trust, and then comes the wallet itself. And most of these countries, the smartphone penetration is not even 50%. So we have ways of helping people who don't have a phone to also participate with virtual wallets and offline verifiable credentials that you can print and carry around with a different technology. But when it comes to standards, of course, the solution is fully compliant with the ARF. But what we have done is we have contextualized it for the global south. So, the EUDI wallet has just started talking about people without phones, centralized HSMs, and things like those. We've been thinking about this for the last 2 years. So when it comes to standards, there's enough technology to say there are standards. But again, enforcement of governance is one thing. And what he mentioned is also the user experience, right? Like if I'm a farmer, I don't have a smartphone, how do I get a wallet? Who do I go to? How do I prove I'm me? And then, get me the $50 that have been given by the government and so on. So yes, we do follow, let's say, MDL versus W3Cs or SDJWTs. We are, of course, big supporters of SDJWTs and W3Cs.
Do you make a choice at all, or do you just say there's the set of options and?
I think it depends on which country you're talking to. Yeah. Usually they tend to look north. So if you go to Latin America, they have been influenced by the US, so they say MDL. And if you go to Africa, they say, W3Cs. But by default, we've been pushing, or let's say, encouraging to go to W3Cs, or, standard, yeah, not necessarily be all MDL. And for presentation layers also, we are going beyond OIDCs and VP. We are using DIDCOMs with a different inherent protocol for delivering credentials in an online manner for remote transactions. So we were like a step ahead of the -7, yeah. But yeah, standards are there, all kinds of standards.
And it sounds like you have a menu full of options then.
Yes, and the other issue is also, verifiable credentials with standard formats become too bulky. So we also have where we have compressed formats to allow, because some of these credentials carry your biometrics, which are heavy payload. So we have offline credentials with facial image, facial biometrics, fingerprint biometrics that you can print and carry with you, right? If you try to put that in a VC with the whole format, it can fit in any printable format, right? So yes, we do offer these things, and use case to use case basis, right? Like if it's your dog's vaccine, you don't need a lot of payload. But if it's your biometric with your family card, which you have your whole family, that somebody can go to the store, present the credential, and any of them can collect rice, that's a different payload, right? So yeah, we have these menus and configurations allowed to make the use case more useful.
Yeah, and such a large menu in a way is interesting, but then people have to choose, right? Or countries have to choose, which may be a challenge. What's the experience? Do you suggest what to pick from the menu, or do you really leave it up to the countries or the use cases? How does that go in practice? That's what you do
If
on a
I
day-to-day
then,
basis.
I'm gonna, sorry, yeah, still just one last. So standards, again, technology is the last thing. What you have to first focus on in streamlining the legal and the commercial policies. All these governments want to be sustainable. They want to generate revenues. So India is probably well funded, right? They want to give away the credentials for free. But many of these countries, they believe in, if I've invested my state's money in building those systems, I should be able to recognize revenue or generate revenue. So in that case, we suggest how they can do it. But when it comes to other sectors, it's purely driven by economics, right? It's like, what is the risk profile of the transaction? Should I choose a certain credential format? What do I put in it? If it's a payment credential, it's a different story, things like those. So we give them the options, the risk profiles, and then they choose what's best for them.
I mean, it's quite interesting what's going on in Europe with regards to the standards that they're selecting for the European Digital Identity Wallet, and it's quite a complex picture. So in the previous panel, we heard about two competing formats, and that both are going to be supported. But actually, there's also ways in which the European Union is constraining the standards being chosen as well. So in any one of these interfaces, whether it's the issue interface or the presentation interface or the interface to the trust lists, there are multiple levels to the protocol. So there's what you might think of as delivery. How do you get the data from A to B? There's format, which is how are you actually going to package that data up? And then there's the data itself. What data elements need to be present? And there are standards and specifications for all of those. And those, in fact, there are multiple standards and specifications for all of those. And within those standards and specifications, there are options and choices. And so it's not just a choice of two, it's a choice of thousands if you look at all the permutations. And so what they're doing in the European Union is they're saying, well, okay, we need to introduce some profiles on top of these to say, well, okay, we're using OpenID for VP, we're using SD-JOT, we're having a PID as the data, as the sort of credential data, but actually we need to constrain it down. Otherwise, there's just no possibility that these things will work together. And that's where there's European standards body ETSI, who has the specific task of writing and defining those profiles. Now, what that means for wider interoperability outside of Europe, I think is an interesting question. But I firmly believe you have to think vertically. You've got to think about the whole kind of stack, and at least get it working with, so that two parties on either side can agree on a set of things that work. And obviously that's what we're doing within Europe at the moment. But taking it beyond Europe is going to be a lot of work.
Would we agree, or would you guys agree that, for instance, the ISO 18315 stack is actually an example that did that quite well, right? They had that vertical.
Yeah, I mean that's fully integrated.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So let's go to the topic of compliance and certification. Right, so we had a bit of a discussion on that also in the previous panel, right? So there's ways for tech providers to do compliance checks themselves, right? Whether or not they support particular specifications and intro profiles. But we're now more and more getting also to the point of certification, right? Also to get trust by the end user. Well, I think, Steve, that's very much where your organization comes in. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing I would say is I think there's some terminology issues. I'm not going to try and define them. I'll just highlight them. So people talk about conformity or conformance assessment. People talk about interoperability. And what else do they talk about? I was going to say something else, but I've forgotten it. But I think there's even within those terms, there's perhaps they talk about certification, of course. And those things can mean different things to different people. So we'll just park that for a second. What I think is more useful is to think about the evolutionary stages that you go along from starting something to a mature ecosystem. And in a lot of identity spaces, we are at the beginning. You know, we're a long way from maturity. And so what FIDES does with sandboxes, that's very much aligned, correct me if I'm wrong, with where we are at the moment, which is experimentation, you're putting things together, you know, it's about enabling potential partners, potential collaborators to plug their solutions together to do proofs of concept. It's not the end goal, it's an important step on the journey. And another step might be where you build reference implementations, you know, so then you've got things that are recognized, accepted ways of understanding the specifications and giving them a, you know, something that you can copy or something that you can test against. But even that doesn't get you perhaps the full set of testing that you want. And then perhaps the third stage I would put is something more like conformity assessment. So if you think about those protocols, like the protocol or the interface between a wallet and a relying party, within those specifications, at every point in that specification, there's a possibility for someone to misunderstand or implement things incorrectly. And so how far do you go in terms of testing that? You know, you could test down to the individual line level, and you have multiple tests for each line in the spec because, you know, it could be taken in different ways. And then perhaps to take it one step further, there's conformity, and then you have maybe certification. And I would say, because there was a question in the previous panel about, you know, do we need certification? You know, isn't it okay? Do we want to democratize things? For me, whether or not you need certification is the choice of the ecosystem owner. It's a scheme decision, you know. And you may decide that because of the scheme we're building, we want to have that,
or maybe even the relying party.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, FIME, we're building conformity assessment tools. You know, that's the thing that we do in payments, and so we think that's the thing we're going to do in identity. We think there's value in that because, you know, it takes you more towards a mature ecosystem.
Are there already examples throughout the world of credentials where there is formal certification? Maybe in India, for instance, or elsewhere? I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, so we did work with the government initially. So these certifications are not, you know, there's no platform as such where you do these certifications, but the specs and everything is available. If you're not adhering to it, then there are certain checks and balances.
Were you audited also, or?
With the wallet, the wallet has recently started. Okay, these checks that are happening through a manual process right now. But talking about the APIs and other authentication APIs and all what are there available in the market, there are automated tools to check and balances. They have kept monetary incentives, compliance documents, security documents that needs to be there. At least you have to have a SOC 2 type 2 based organization or ISO organization. You have to go through those qualifications. These are basic things.
And does it also result into accountability?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is more important.
Okay. Maybe
yes,
Mikaël
maybe a question to come back on the certification that I work in many years in the security industry. Everything was managed by regulation, standard, and strong certification before releasing a product on the market. Whatever it is, it has always been like that, and answering the trust and the security of the system. And I think that we have to pass this step. At one moment, we will have to completely certify wallet and solution, and just to be sure that we are compliant and providing the right security level, which is mandatory for a state, that to deploy the solution, and from another side, to ensure the trust from the user. That because we are entering in a world where we see that the future of cybersecurity attack are going to grow. Okay, we are going to face to this transformation in the industry with the revolution of intelligence, artificial, upcoming quantum computing. We have now to change potentially cryptography protocol with implementing post-quantum cryptography into complete system and solutions. And everything can only pass par certification, an external body, an external lab that could certify that vendors are compliant with the complete system in place. That's not only on the software side, we are talking also about the hardware side, that's implementing in the mobile platform. As today you are using a secure element to pay with your phone, you have all these schemes, and we have to, there is a step where, for sure, certification is tough, is plenty of constraints, is also a big cost, okay, for vendor, but we have to move to this step, I'm pretty sure.
It's quite interesting to compare the payments industry with, say, the identity industry, because in the payments industry and banking in general, it's about managing risk.
Yeah.
And so whilst there may be some regulated things that you have to do, in a lot of cases, banks are making choices based on, you know, their own calculus. In the identity space, particularly in perhaps public sector identity, that isn't something that those organisations are so used to. They're more used to building things that are going to be, you know, bulletproof. And maybe there's somewhere in the middle. There's a better route. I don't know, but of course, you know, I believe that certification testing is important, but I also agree that it mustn't be a barrier. Otherwise, this just won't work. You know, people won't invest. You know, we won't get adoption. So we have to find an appropriate balance. Yeah.
That's the key question.
I get a signal. Well, I think there's many more things we could discuss, and I think it's for sure there's still plenty of work to do. But yeah, I want to thank you all for all your sharing your experiences, and yeah, let's continue talking the rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.